Talk about rear shocks. There's basically two kinds of shocks seen on early 70s mini bikes. Sebec, which are these, made in Italy, and Betors, which are made in Spain. They're pretty similar other than look. The Sebec have a black body and the Betors have a chrome. But they come apart differently for rebuild. On these, what you do is you put it in your vise right like this, and you push it in and compress the spring, and then grab that ring with the vise. And then once you do that, the body unscrews. It comes off this way. I get this. Then with the body off, you can compress it again and take this pin out, and you can take the whole assembly apart. And buff it, wire wheel it, do whatever to make it look better. Sebec are a little different. Instead, their end cap comes off, and this is dissimilar metal. This is like aluminum and that's steel, so a lot of times they're hard to get apart. And again, I use this crescent tool to aid that because it's really easy to crush these bodies. So you have to be careful. But on the Sebec, then you take, it's usually 11 millimeters in like this, and you compress the spring a bit and then wind this off, and you can take this completely apart. You cannot powder coat the Sebec body because there is a non-replaceable nylon insert that the shock rod goes through. But you can get everything else apart and basically get it cleaned up. Now, if your springs are really rusty, you can replace them. A guy sells these online at oldschoolminibikes.com. And they're cheap. What they are is Ruttman front end springs, and he has like 1,000 of them. And you can put them in the Sebec. I haven't tried them in the Betors, but I imagine you can. The only deal is that if you look, this spring is slightly smaller diameter than this one. Not by much, but enough. So the trick is you have to get the new spring, which is a little bit bigger, to fit in these cups. And what I do is I bring this over to the bench grinder, and I will just bend the top, or grind the top coil to be slightly less diameter, almost conical. And then I can put that, it'll fit into these cups, and you end up with brand new springs, which gets rid of these rusty things. It definitely improves the look of your shocks. Here's the new springs with the top coils made conical, and then that way the cups fit on the spring. Now I do spray the springs with some clear lacquer so they don't rust. Newly rebuilt shock with the brand new spring. I mean, the ones that I was taking out, it wasn't terribly rusted, but what the heck, it wasn't that hard to do. Here's the one I have yet to do. Gives you a nice shock. Getting ready to mount the swing arm. And of course, here is our pivot tube, all greased up, ready to go inside the swing arm. And then using the chain adjusters and 3/8 24 bolts, we'll attach it to the pivot point. And then also put the shocks on so that we have a stable rear end and we can start thinking about mounting a wheel. Chain stays. Notice how I have this oriented. When you tighten the bolt, it goes up. And then on this side, it's exactly the opposite. Again, when you tighten the bolt, it goes up, it goes tighter. That's how you want to do this. I know symmetrically they're not the same, but that's how you want to do it, because you always want to make your chain tighter. There's rarely that you're ever going to want to make it looser. I also have the swing arm pushed this way towards the motor plate, because when we do the chain adjustment, you always want to have room to make the chain tighter. Also, these bolts have to go out. You don't want them going the other way. Trust me on this, because the wheel will be in the way. And up here, I made the bolts longer because we have a bracket that holds the fender. Also, you can see I am using lock nuts. I am using this kind of lock nut. I'm not using the nylon lock nut, though you could, but these are what was used on the original bike build, was this style of lock nut. Now let's talk about the wheels. Remember, they were painted yellow, and I media blasted them lightly, and then just sprayed some clear lacquer over them. I got like a lot of the rust off, but obviously I can't make the chrome look all shiny again. It was too far gone, but I am not going to re-chrome rims. I am not that guy. It's just not in this wheelhouse, and it takes too long and it's expensive. Tires, I kept the originals. They do have some issues, but they are original and they're tubed, so stuff like this doesn't really matter. Now, let's talk about wheel bearings, though. The wheel bearings are a standard outside, but the inside is 1/2 inch. That is unlike nearly every other mini bike bearing, which is got the standard size on the outside, but 5/8 on the inside. If your wheel bearings are okay, you can take them apart. You can take the dust seals off and clean them up and re-grease them. I highly suggest that, because finding 1 3/8 outside and 1/2 inch inside high-speed bearings is tough. You can find this style. This is a low-speed bearing with a standard outside 1 3/8 and a 1/2 inch inside, but these are not designed for like wheels. This would work perhaps on the steering column instead of those nylon spacers, but that's about all this is good for. So you've got a couple choices if the wheel bearings are shot. You can look online and try and find the proper high-speed ones, but it is tricky. Or you can convert to 5/8. I don't recommend that, but you can. You have to drill out the swing arm bushing, you have to drill out the drum brake, and you need new spacers and obviously a new axle. But I have done it in a pinch. It does work. Speaking of which, on 10-inch bikes, these are axles and wheel spacers, because this wheel spacer goes inside here so you don't get crushed when you tighten the wheel down. You can see that they use different wheel spacers. So they actually used 3/8 inch axles on the 10-inch models, and then came up with this wheel spacer with a 1/2 inch here. So you still have those 1/2 inch bearings, this part 1/2 inch, but you got to use this spacer. Before you put the rear wheel on, you need to mount the rear fender. Believe me, do it now. And originally, if you notice, the holes for the fenders were pretty big. That's because they had a rubber mount inside them. Original Speedways, early ones, didn't have that, and the fenders would crack right about here. So they rubber mounted them to prevent that. Now, I know the rubber mounts are almost always going to be gone. So what I do is I go to the hardware store and I buy rubber stoppers. And then I drill a hole in the center, and then I cut them in 1/8 inch sections on the bandsaw, like little pieces of pepperoni, and you end up something like this. And you have to mount, you can see where I've mounted them here, and also in this junction too. Anywhere there's a fender mount, you're going to need two on the front fender too. Here's the front fender mounting bracket. They're going to have to go on there also. And then you're going to need one more up here for the gas tank mount.